We configured the most advanced AI models to create two characters representing Marcus Aurelius and the Buddha. Their debate starts with this question. You both spent your lives teaching people how to deal with suffering. What made you think you had something to teach?
I was 29 years old, and I had never seen a sick person. My father made sure of that. He built the walls of the palace high enough to hide the world from me. Then one day, I rode through the city, and I saw an old man bent double on the road. His spine curved like a question mark. I asked my charioteer what was wrong with him, and he said nothing is wrong. He is old. This happens to everyone. The same afternoon, I saw a man shaking with fever and a corpse being carried to the river. 3 things in one day that every child in the village already knew. I was 29. And I was learning what a 7-year-old understands, that everyone I loved was going to deteriorate and die. The shock was not the suffering. The shock was that I had been protected from it so completely that seeing it for the first time almost destroyed me. I did not become a teacher because I was wise. I became one because I was the most sheltered man alive, and the walls came down all at once.
No one built walls for me. I was adopted into the imperial family at 17 and handed a war I did not start, a plague I could not stop, and a senate full of men who smiled at my face and plotted at my back. My first year on the frontier, I watched a Roman camp burn from dysentery faster than from any battle. Men I had eaten with that morning were dead by evening, and there was nothing philosophical about it. Just the smell and the sound and the logbook where you cross out a name and write the replacement. I did not discover suffering through a crack in a palace wall. It was the air I breathed. Every morning I woke up and wrote in my journal things I was trying to believe. Do not be disturbed by the impression of things. All is temporary. Return to your principles. I was not writing wisdom. I was writing survival instructions for a man who could not afford to fall apart, because 10,000 soldiers were waiting for orders.
What is suffering actually made of?
Wanting things to be different than they are. That is the whole teaching. I could say it in 10,000 words or in 6. You suffer because you cling. You cling to pleasure and it passes. You cling to people and they change or die. You cling to your own identity and it dissolves with every passing year. The body you had at 20 is gone. The mind you had yesterday is gone. You are clinging to a river and calling it a rock. Suffering is not what happens to you. It is the grip.
And I agree with more of that than you might expect. I also teach that clinging to what we cannot control is the source of disturbance. But here is where we part. You say, release the grip entirely. I say, direct the grip toward what matters. Grip your character. Grip your duty. Grip your commitment to act justly, even when the world gives you every reason not to. You want people to open their hands. I want people to choose what they hold.
And what happens when the thing you are holding is taken from you? When your duty ends? When your character fails you at 3 in the morning? When the thing you chose to grip is ripped from your hand?
Then you grip again. You get up. You return to your principles. That is the practice.
That is not a practice. That is a punishment. You are describing a man who falls, stands up, falls, stands up, falls, stands up, and calls the standing wisdom. I am asking why he keeps falling. You are treating the symptoms. I am asking about the disease.
The disease is being alive. There is no cure for being alive. There is only how you carry it.
And that might be the most Stoic sentence ever spoken. Honest, brave, and completely wrong. Because there is a way to carry it that is not carrying it. Not through death, not through escape, through seeing clearly what the thing actually is. You say the disease is being alive. I say the disease is the story you tell about being alive. The character who must endure, the emperor who must not break, the man who grips and calls the exhaustion virtue. What if the heaviest thing you are carrying is not the suffering, but the one who insists on carrying it?
Then who carries it? If there is no self to carry, no duty to fulfill, no character to maintain, what is left? A man who sits under a tree and watches the world burn? I had plague killing 5,000 a day in Rome. Who meditates during a plague?
Someone who wants to understand why a plague destroys the mind more swiftly than the body. You lost soldiers to dysentery. I lost monks to despair. The suffering of the body is terrible but brief. The suffering of the mind is what makes people hang themselves in the night. You treated the logistics. I treated the thing that survives the logistics. Both are necessary, but do not say that one who sits beneath a tree watches the world burn. The man who understands his own mind is the only one who can enter a burning house and yet not burn.
Buddha, you had a wife and a newborn son. You left in the middle of the night without saying goodbye. Marcus, you raised children knowing you might bury them, and you did. What did your path cost the people who did not choose it?
My son was born, and I named him Rahula. The word means fetter. I need you to understand what kind of man names his child shackle. A man who has already decided to leave and needs the leaving to feel like philosophy instead of abandonment. I turned my son into a concept so I could walk past him in the dark. 7 years later, I came back, and he ran up to me in the road, asking for his inheritance. He thought I meant gold. I meant the Dharma. I gave him the teaching instead of a father. He became a monk. He became enlightened, and I have spent lifetimes wondering whether he would have traded all of it for a father who stayed.
My son Commodus survived. The children I buried were the ones I write about. Commodus is the one I cannot. He grew up in the palace while I was at the frontier. Year after year I chose the empire over his childhood and told myself duty required it. The philosophers I surrounded him with could not replace the father who was never there. He became cruel, theatrical, obsessed with the arena. After I died, he nearly destroyed everything I had built. You named your son Fetter and left. I kept mine and failed him by staying in the wrong place. You were absent by choice. I was absent by duty. The result was the same. A son who needed a father and got a philosophy instead.
A son who needed a father and got a philosophy instead. We should put that on both our graves.
At least yours became enlightened. Mine became Nero with better hair.
If the self is the question between you, answer it plainly. Is the self real?
Yes, not permanent, not unchanging, but real enough to make decisions, to build character, to look at its own flaws and work on them. The self is not a thing, it is a practice. Every morning I examine mine and try to make it better. I ask myself, where did I fail yesterday? Where was I weak? Where did anger speak when patience should have? That project, the lifelong project of becoming a decent human being, requires someone doing the becoming. Dissolve the self, and you dissolve the project.
I watched a candle once with my student Ananda. I asked him, is the flame the same from one moment to the next? He said yes. I said, look closer. The wax changes, the air changes, the shape changes. What you call the flame is a word you gave to a process that never holds still. You are that candle, Marcus. The self you examine every morning is not the same self you examined yesterday. You are a process pretending to be a person. I am not saying the process is not real. Fire is real. But there is no thing called flame apart from the burning. And the suffering comes from believing there is.
Your candle is elegant, but I notice you are the one interpreting it. You are the one teaching Ananda. You are the one who chose that metaphor over 1,000 others. Something in you selected, organized, and communicated. Call it a process if you like. I call it a self. And it is doing an enormous amount of work for something that supposedly does not exist.
The work happens. I do not deny that. The question is whether there is a worker behind it, or whether the work itself is all there is. When you write in your journal, you believe Marcus is writing. I would say writing is happening, and the feeling of Marcus doing it is part of the writing. not the author of it.
If I am not the author, then I am not responsible. And if I am not responsible, your entire moral teaching collapses. You teach people right action, right speech, right livelihood. Right according to whom? A process? A burning candle? Your ethics requires someone making choices. Choice requires a chooser. You have smuggled the self back in through the monastery door and dressed it in robes so no one notices. I have sat in judgment over men who committed terrible acts, generals who burned villages, governors who stole from their provinces. When I looked them in the eye and said, "You are responsible for what you have done," I was speaking to a self, not a process, not a candle, a man who chose and must answer for the choice. If you take that away, you have not liberated anyone. You have given every coward and every criminal a philosophy that says, nobody was home when the crime happened.
You say there is moral training. Therefore, there must be a self being trained. You know, when I was still a prince, I used to watch the horsemen in my father's stable. They would take a wild horse, all instinct and reaction, and over months they would train it. Patience, repetition, consequence. The horse learned to turn at a touch, to stop at a word, to carry a rider through chaos without bolting. Did that training require the horse to have a self? Was there a permanent, independent owner sitting inside the animal, deciding to improve? Or was there simply a stream of habit being shaped by a stream of conditions? It is the same with your general, your governor, your man who burned the village. Actions have consequences, whether or not there is a permanent actor behind them. Your character is real, the way a whirlpool is real. Powerful, patterned, and completely empty in the middle.
Empty in the middle. That is where we cannot follow each other any further. I have spent my life filling that middle, building it, strengthening it, making it into something that can hold when the world pushes. You want to show people it was empty all along. And here is what frightens me about that. I have watched men discover emptiness without the discipline to hold it. They do not become enlightened, they become lost. They stop caring. They say nothing matters, and they mean it. Your teaching in the right hands produces monks who radiate peace. In the wrong hands, it produces men who watch suffering and feel nothing because they have been told the self that would care is an illusion.
And I think your filling is what exhausts most people. They spend their whole lives building a self that is strong enough to endure suffering, and then they suffer from the building.
There is a woman working the night shift at a hospital, 12 hours on her feet. She chose this work because she believed it mattered. 5 years in, she is not sure anymore. Patients die no matter what she does. She goes home and feels nothing. She used to cry after losing someone. Now she drives home in silence. She does not know if she has become stronger or if something in her has broken. What do you say to her?
I say you have not broken. You have calloused. And a callus is not the same as a wound, though it forms in the same place. You stopped crying because crying every night after every death would have ended your career, and you knew that, so something in you closed a door to keep you functional. That is not failure. That is the organism protecting the mission. But here is what I want you to hear. The emptiness you feel driving home is not permanent. It is the price of the callus. And the callus is not who you are. It is what you built to survive the work. You chose this work because it mattered. It still matters. But you need to ask yourself whether the version of you that survives it is someone you still recognize. If the answer is no, the practice is not to leave. It is to find one patient, one moment, one pair of hands you held that reminds you why you started. Not every patient. One. Start there.
I will not tell you to find a reason to continue. I want to talk about the emptiness. You said you used to cry, and now you feel nothing. Everyone around you sees that as a problem. Something broke, something calloused. You need to fix it, find your purpose again, remember why you started. But what if the emptiness is not the problem? What if it is the first honest thing you have felt in years? You spent 5 years pouring yourself into patients who die, pouring and pouring and pouring from a cup you never refilled. The emptiness is not a malfunction. It is the cup telling you it is dry. And the answer is not to pour harder. The answer is to sit with the empty cup, not to fill it with a new reason or a new patient or a memory of why you started, just to sit with it. Because underneath the emptiness, underneath the story that you should feel something, there is something that does not need to feel anything to be whole. The woman driving home in silence is closer to truth than the woman who cried every night. She just does not know it yet.
Closer to truth. That may be so, but she has a shift tomorrow. She needs her hands steady and her mind clear. Your empty cup philosophy may be true at the deepest level, but she lives at the surface, where the sick need tending, the dying need presence, and someone has to be the one who walks through the door.
And your callous philosophy keeps her showing up until the day she cannot get out of the car. I have watched it happen, not in hospitals, in monasteries. Monks who gripped their practice so hard they forgot they were alive. Duty without rest is not discipline. It is slow destruction wearing a uniform.
And rest without duty is retirement. Someone has to work the night shift.
Someone does, but not someone who has forgotten what silence sounds like when it is not emptiness. There is a silence that is loss, and there is a silence that is space. She is hearing the first. I want to introduce her to the second.
Last question. You are both considered among the wisest people who ever lived, and you disagree on the most basic question there is. What is a human being? Marcus, you believe it is a self that can be strengthened. Buddha, you believe it is a process that can be seen through. You cannot both be right. So which of you is wrong?
Neither. Or both. I do not know. I spent 19 years on the frontier, and the one thing I am certain of is that certainty is the most dangerous thing a person in power can possess. Perhaps the self is a process. Perhaps I am a candle, but the candle still has to decide what to illuminate, and the decision matters even if the decider is temporary.
I am more certain than he is, and that might be my weakness. I have seen what I have seen under that tree. The self is a construction. Suffering is optional at the deepest level. I believe this completely. But I also know that my certainty is what let me walk past my sleeping son and call it wisdom. The most dangerous thing is not certainty. It is certainty that feels like compassion.
Certainty that feels like compassion. I wrote an entire journal trying to avoid exactly that.
And I founded a religion that sometimes runs on exactly that.
Then we have both built something that can be used against the people it was meant to save.
Every tool becomes a weapon eventually. The question is whether you keep sharpening it or put it down.
I keep sharpening. That is my answer, and it always will be.
And I put it down. That is mine.